There's a stretch of Route 287 in Texas that I've learned to avoid. It's not because the road is bad or dangerous. In fact, it's actually quite quiet. Straight, well-paved, open landscape. But every time I drive along it, the same thing happens. Always at night. Always at the same spot, between two unnamed exits, almost at the Oklahoma border. It starts with a smell, strong, acidic, impossible to ignore. It smells like sulfur. But it's not the faint smell of bad diesel or old exhaust. It's an aggressive smell that seeps through the cracks, even when everything is closed. The first time I smelled it, I thought it was an engine leak. I pulled over, checked everything, and nothing. The smell lasts a few minutes, but while it's there, the truck starts to feel strange. The dashboard starts to flicker, as if the battery were failing. The interior light flickers. The radio hisses. And worst of all, the steering wheel starts to stiffen, as if the power steering were failing. This has happened to me 3 times. 3. And always at the exact same point. One night, I decided to record the whole thing with my cell phone. I left it on the stand, filming the dashboard and the GPS. When I watched it later, the recording was distorted at the exact moment the smell started. The entire image pixelated, the sound disappeared. When it came back, I had already passed the stretch. I started asking other drivers. No one talks openly, but the older ones avoid going there after 10 p.m. One of them told me that he had seen lights in the field, off the road, when he smelled the smell. He said he tried to film it, but his cell phone froze. Another said that his radio started talking to itself, as if someone had taken control. I didn't take it very seriously until it happened to me. It was a dry night, with little traffic, and I was alone on the road. It started with the smell. Strong as always. It burned my nose. This time, the entire dashboard went out and then came back on with a pop. The headlights flickered. And the radio, even though it was off, turned on by itself. It wasn't static. It wasn't a hiss. It was a voice. Clear. Masculine. Cold. No accent. It just said, "Go back." It repeated itself about 3 times. Same intonation. Same speed. As if it had been recorded. I turned off the radio in shock. I took the key out of the ignition. Everything went dark. Still, the voice continued for another 5 seconds. No lights. No power. Just the sound. The cabin smelled so strong of sulfur that my eyes started to water. When everything stopped, I started the truck again, without thinking, and accelerated as if there was someone behind me. And to this day, I have no idea what would have happened if I had stopped. After that night, I started to mark exactly where it happened. I used the GPS dialer and set an alert on my phone. The exact spot is between 2 old poles, far away from the road, with no lighting whatsoever. The landscape there is strangely the same for several kilometers, dry fields, old fence, nothing else. But at that specific spot, the air changes. It gets heavier. The smell of sulfur isn't just a smell, it's like it takes over your body. It gives you a metallic taste in your mouth, itches behind your eyes. I swear, the last time I saw it, my tongue felt numb, like I had chewed a battery. And that's when I started to think it wasn't the trucks doing anything. I had it completely serviced, replaced cables, battery, alternator. I even changed the radio, thinking it was interference. I spent more than I should have trying to figure it out. But nothing worked. Every time I pass by, it all happens again. Same symptoms. Same smell. And the voice. That damn voice that now seems to change tone. On the last trip, it said something different. When the smell came and the radio turned on, the voice didn't say, "Go back." It said, "You've gone too far." That's all. And it turned off by itself. The feeling was horrible, as if I had ignored an order I shouldn't have ignored. As if I had entered a place I wasn't supposed to be. I started having nightmares about that stretch. Dreams in which I stopped the truck in the middle of the road and walked towards the field. There's always a light in the distance. And every time I get close, I wake up. Sweating, with the taste of sulfur still in my mouth, as if I had breathed it in while I was asleep. I've tried to change the route, but because of deliveries and schedules, sometimes there's no way. I'm stuck with this. There was one time I took a passenger, a colleague going in the same direction, and, I swear, he started feeling sick out of nowhere when we got to that stretch. Nausea, shaking. And he didn't even know the story. He just said, "There's something very wrong here." One night, I tried to stop. Just to see what would happen. I stood there, engine running, lights low, the smell coming strong. The radio off. I waited. For a while, nothing happened. But then, the left side mirror started to fog up, even though there was no humidity in the air. And a shape appeared there, like a hunched figure. Something slowly approaching. I didn't get out of the truck. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the mirror. And the voice came back. Softly. Coming from the vent. Almost a whisper, "It's too late." I revved the engine full blast and drove off. I went through 2 red lights that morning. And since then, I've only driven along that stretch of road during the day. Never after sunset. But even during the day, the thing didn't stop. The smell still comes sometimes, weaker, but present. And the dashboard has already blinked again, even under bright sunlight. The radio, however, doesn't turn on by itself anymore. At least, not while I'm awake. Because there was one time, at a stop after crossing 287, that I left the truck in sleep mode, with everything turned off. I dozed off for about 20 minutes. When I woke up, the radio was on, at minimum volume, repeating a phrase that left me cold, "You're still here." I recorded it. I deleted it. I don't know why. I was afraid to save it. I returned to the stretch of road a few weeks later, but this time I just watched. I parked at a high point on the highway and looked from afar, with binoculars, just to see if I could see anything unusual. After a few minutes, I swear to God, I saw a pickup truck parked exactly at that spot where I always smell it. There was someone outside, but I couldn't see their face. Only their posture. They were standing still, staring at the field, as if hypnotized. I stared until the person got in the car and drove away slowly. I don't know who it was. But since then, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's experienced this. I told this story to my sister, who is more skeptical and down to earth. She tried to explain it in 1,000 ways: gas in the ground, electrical failure, stress hallucination. It could be. Maybe it is. But tell me, what gas in the ground whistles on the radio and forms complete sentences? What kind of electrical failure writes messages on the mirror or chooses to say, "Turn back," at the exact moment you enter a specific point on the road? It could all be in my head, but, what if it isn't? What if it's some kind of warning? A limit? A line we shouldn't cross? Today, every time the GPS sends me down that route, I ignore it. Even if it takes longer. Even if the customer complains. I'd rather waste time than risk it again. Because I've learned one thing: the smell of sulfur isn't just a sign of engine trouble. It's a sign that there's something there, on that forgotten stretch of Route 287, that doesn't want to be seen. And if one day you're passing by there and you smell that smell invading the cabin, don't stop, don't touch the radio, and most of all, don't look in the mirrors. Because the last time I looked, I saw something staring back. I'm not the kind of person who looks up at the sky looking for strange things. I don't believe anything until I see it with my own eyes. But that's exactly what changed my mind. I saw it with my own eyes. And it wasn't just once. It happened 3 nights in a row, always on an empty stretch of I-25 between Wyoming and southern Montana. I was carrying a light load, so I could drive at a leisurely pace, without too much pressure. It was winter, and the roads were practically empty after 10 p.m. It was silent, with only the headlights illuminating the asphalt and the sound of the engine keeping me company. That's when I noticed it for the first time. In the rearview mirror, something strange. It wasn't a reflection. They were lights in the sky, behind me, following me. 2 lights, similar to truck headlights, but suspended in the air, too high to be a car and too low to be a plane. They stayed there, moving slowly, as if they were escorting me. I tried to ignore them. I turned on the radio, turned up the volume, sang loudly. And then they disappeared. They simply disappeared. I thought it was all in my head. I even mentioned it to another truck driver, and he joked, "You were just too sleepy." I let it slide. But the next night, on the same stretch of road, they came back. This time, they appeared earlier, before 11. I turned off my high beams just to see if the reflection would change, and the lights behind me remained the same. Stationary, floating, without making a sound, without blinking. Every time I slowed down, they slowed down too. And when a car came in the opposite direction, they disappeared instantly, as if hiding. That's when I realized that it wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a plane, a drone, or a satellite. They behaved as if they were conscious. As if they were watching me. Or following me. By the 3rd night, I couldn't pretend it was a coincidence anymore. Same clear sky, same empty road, same feeling that something was with me. When I looked out the windshield, I saw the lights again, lower this time. As if they had dropped a level. And for the first time, they blinked. Alternately. As if to get someone's attention. As an invitation. Or a warning. I felt my stomach sink. It was impossible not to think, this wasn't just an observation. This wanted me to understand. To react. I thought about stopping the truck, getting out, and facing it. But something inside me told me not to. That heavy feeling you feel when you drive into the wrong place. Your hands sweating on the steering wheel, your throat dry even with a bottle of water at your side. I kept driving, and the lights followed me. One on each side, a little above the line of the truck, like 2 headlights suspended in the darkness. It was as if they were tracing a straight line with me, exactly at my speed. And that was what terrified me the most. They didn't miss a beat, they didn't sway, they didn't vary. If I accelerated, they did too. If I braked, they followed without hesitation. I even passed a stretch where there was a cell phone signal tower, and I tried to film with my cell phone. The camera captured the road, the dashboard, but the lights didn't appear in the recording. 0. Nothing. No white, no reflection, no distortion. Just pure darkness. And they were still there, outside, visible only to the naked eye. When I approached a 24-hour gas station further ahead, with a few cars in the yard, the lights simply went up, in a sharp, quick movement, straight to the sky, and disappeared. I only started breathing again when I pulled over and got out of the truck. My legs were shaking. I couldn't even eat anything that night. I sat inside the cab, still, staring at the rearview mirror as if they would come back on at any moment. The next day, I spent the whole day thinking about it. I tried to plot the exact route, the time, the position of the lights. I even compared them to air traffic maps. Nothing there matched a flight, a balloon, a tower, or a satellite. I called a friend who lives in Billings and is kind of paranoid about these things. I told him everything, hoping he would laugh. But he was silent. Then he said, "They show up when you're alone. And when you can't pretend everything's normal anymore." I asked him what he meant by that, and all he said was, "They don't choose randomly." He hung up right away. He never mentioned it again. On the fourth night, I changed my route. I took a different, busier interstate. Even so, on the quietest stretch, almost at the Canadian border, they appeared again. But only for a minute. Just long enough for me to realize that they were now even lower. And closer. I had the feeling that they were testing my limits. Seeing how much I could take. And worst of all, when I pulled over at a gas station to fill up, a guy in the truck next to me, out of nowhere, turned to me and said, "You saw them too, right? The lights. They're flashing at you now." I didn't answer. I just got into the truck, locked it, and stayed there for hours. The radio turned on very low. Pretending that none of it was happening. After that chat with the guy at the gas station, I started to notice the people around me more. And I realized that there are others like me. Drivers who don't talk, but look up at the sky in fear. People who drive with the radio off, their headlights always on low beam, as if they don't want to attract attention. At a stop in Idaho, an old-timer said to me quietly, "If they start making noise, that's it." I asked what noise. He didn't answer. She just took his coffee and left, as if she had said too much. Since then, every time the engine goes silent for a few seconds and the wind stops, I wait to hear something from up there. Last week, the lights came back on. I was in southern Wyoming, a freezing cold morning, with no cars around. This time, they blinked again, but more rhythmically. Like a pattern. 3 short blinks, 2 long ones. Repeating. For a moment, I thought it was a code. I don't know if it was for me or for something other than the road. And then, for the first time, I felt a vibration in the cabin. Not in the floor. In the air. As if the sound wasn't coming from outside, or from inside, but passing through. It felt like you get too close to a high-voltage pole. An invisible pressure. And then, silence. They haven't shown up since. But I've also avoided driving alone. Whenever I can, I try to arrange a convoy with someone. I no longer stay in isolated rest areas, and I never stop in the same place twice. My GPS still records the coordinates from those nights. I haven't erased them. I'm afraid I'll forget. Or worse, I'll remember too much. Because deep down, I know that it wasn't just light. It wasn't just observation. It was communication. And somehow, they were trying to see who would respond. Who would follow. Who would obey their call. Today marks exactly 1 month since the last time they appeared. But I still look up at the sky every night, even when I'm at home. My eyes search for that slow, repeated blink that seems to choose you without you realizing it. Because I know they'll come back. They always do. The lights came on for the 3rd night. This time, they were lower. And they blinked as if they were calling me. I've taken so many alternative routes because of construction, accidents, temporary closures, that I stopped questioning them. The GPS redirects, we just follow. It was on one of these roads that I took a road that, to this day, no one can explain to me where it is. It was in the interior of Missouri, between two small towns, on a cloudy morning. Everything was marked: cones, reflective signs, even a support car flashing an orange light. Everything seemed normal. The GPS recalculated on its own, and a voice that wasn't the usual one said, "Take the detour ahead." I found the tone strange. More robotic. But I followed. I thought it was just a system update. The entrance was narrow, but paved. It started with forest on both sides, and soon it became completely dark, with no streetlights. The curious thing is that there was not a single car in front or behind. Only me. But I kept going because, for some reason, the GPS showed a route with a reduced time. But I soon realized that the kilometers were not decreasing. The arrival time was frozen. As if I was not really moving forward. That's when I looked to the side and saw the first thing wrong, a yellow traffic sign, like the ones for warning, with big black letters that said, "You should have come back at first warning." The worst part was that I was stuck. I didn't know if it was a joke, some crazy campaign, or if I had misunderstood. But then others came. Every 300 or 400 meters, another sign. One said, "She still cries for you." Another, "Going back doesn't undo what you've done." That was destroying me inside. Because they weren't generic messages. They were personal. As if someone knew exactly what I was carrying with me. And then came the worst of all, almost at the end of a curve. "You shouldn't have left your daughter alone." I froze. The truck almost went off the road. Nobody knew about that. Nobody. I never told anyone. I pulled over to the shoulder of the road, if you could even call it a shoulder, and began to shake. This was impossible. I had only left my daughter alone once, when she was little, for about 5 minutes while I went to the backyard. She locked herself in the bathroom and cried, and to this day I carry that guilt like an anchor. I never told anyone. Not even her mother. And now there was a traffic sign, in the middle of an empty road, throwing this in my face. I took a deep breath, put it in gear, and tried to get out of there. But the road seemed endless. I continued driving on that road for over an hour, but the GPS still showed the same estimated time. It wasn't going up or down. It just got stuck, as if it was holding me there. The landscape began to change subtly. The trees seemed drier, the branches like fingers pointing to the road. No sound other than the engine. No animals, no lights. And more signs began to appear. Now white, like instruction signs, but with absurd messages. "She didn't forget, you'll pay for driving forever." I started to sweat. I turned the steering wheel hard on the first dirt road I saw, trying to get off that path, but the road led nowhere. Just bushes. I got back on the road. The same. The same. As if I had never turned. The weirdest part was when I saw a blue sign, the kind you see when you sign for service, like, "Next gas station in 10 miles, but it was handwritten, crooked, with dripping ink. "What you feel now," she felt that night. I couldn't hold it in. I pulled over, opened the cabin door, and threw up on the side. The smell in the air seemed to have changed, like it was sweeter, more rotten. The kind of smell you can't quite place but know shouldn't be there. I climbed back in, my heart pounding. I reflexively turned on the radio, trying to fill the silence. Just hiss. Then a slow, old-school song. I turned it off immediately. It was messing with my head on a level that no longer felt psychological. It felt physical. Real. I started taking pictures of the license plates, trying to at least prove it to myself later. But none of the photos would save. The camera would open, take pictures, and when I went to look at the roll, nothing. black screen. As if the phone refused to record. And then came the last sign, which made my hands freeze on the steering wheel. It was red, huge, alone in the middle of the road. It said, "Admitting is not the same as fixing." After that, the road made a sharp left turn. When I came out of it, suddenly I was back on the original route. Everything was lit up. Trucks coming in the opposite direction. GPS was working. Normal signs. It was as if nothing had happened. But inside the cabin, on the passenger seat, there was a piece of paper. I picked it up without even breathing. It was an old, folded sheet of paper with a single sentence written in pen. "If you lie to yourself again, you'll be back in the hallway." I threw it in the glove compartment and drove straight to the next town. I didn't talk to anyone for 2 days. I still have the paper. Crumpled up, tucked away in an envelope, like I was afraid to throw it away and it would pull me back in. To this day, I can't find where I turned on the map. No record. No detour entries in the GPS history. Just what I saw. Just what I felt. And that damn sign. "You shouldn't have left your daughter alone." Since that day, I've been paying extra attention to any and all detours. I don't take poorly marked roads, I don't trust routes that are recalculated late at night, and I turn off my GPS whenever it tries to redirect me without warning. But my biggest fear isn't going to go back to that place. It's not knowing when it's going to happen again, because it doesn't seem to follow any rules. I've heard other truck drivers talk about strange shortcuts, routes that don't go back on the map. One of them said he got stuck on a road where the mile markers were going back instead of forward. No one takes it very seriously, until it's you. Sometimes I wonder if that hallway was really a place. It could have been a mistake, a delusion, I don't know. But the detail that always destroys me inside is that all the phrases on the sign said real things, things that I felt, that I remember with shame and guilt. Things that I never told my ex-wife or my daughter. And even now, writing this, I feel like I'm giving some kind of permission for that to come back. I've thought about burning the paper. I've thought about tearing it up. But deep down, I know it won't do any good. That thing stayed with me. Like a threat that only I understand. There are nights when I wake up sweating, with the image of the signs flashing behind my eyes. And always in the same dream, everything ends with a sharp curve and the sound of the GPS saying, "Recalculating. Take the detour ahead." I wake up and go straight to check the truck's dashboard, even though it's parked in the garage. I've seen the route marker flashing with the screen all white, with no information at all. This lasted for seconds, but it was enough to chill my spine. It's as if that road still knew where to find me. And was waiting for another mistake. If you're driving late at night, tired, and you see a perfectly marked detour where there shouldn't be anything, don't follow the GPS, don't trust the signs. Especially if one of them speaks to you. Because once you're there, you're not just driving. You're being reminded. And you don't always come back. Or if you do, it's not the same. The sign said, "You shouldn't have left your daughter alone." I didn't even tell anyone that. I drive a lot in the southern United States, mainly between Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. They are long routes, open roads, and almost always with little traffic at dawn. It was on one of these trips that I saw something that to this day makes me pull over to the side of the road when I see a stork on the road. It was around 2 in the morning, on a stretch between Shreveport and Jackson. I was alone, with a small load, the asphalt wet from the light rain, and everything was calm until then. The highway was almost all mine. Until I saw the headlights approaching in my rearview mirror. It was a tow truck, the big truck that usually carries cars on 2 levels. It was coming fast, with yellowish, dull headlights, like those of an old vehicle. It passed me like a blur, and what caught my attention was the noise. It made none. None. Not the roar of the engine, not the sound of tires on the wet road. Nothing. It just passed by. But what really made me uncomfortable was what I saw in the cars on the platform. They were all old models, from the 50s or 60s, and they were all intact, with no sign of damage or rust. They seemed frozen in time. I thought it was transportation to some event, museum, I don't know. But then I looked in the rearview mirror again. And that's when my stomach turned. Because the cars had people inside. All of them. One in each car. Motionless. Sitting as if they were waiting. Their faces were obscured by the shadows, but I could see that they were human figures. Old clothes, shoulders slumped. None of them moved. None of them looked to the sides. They just sat there, like living dolls. I froze. I looked again, trying to find some explanation, and the stork was no longer there. It was that simple. In less than 20 seconds, it had completely disappeared from the road. I slowed down, hoping to see her up ahead, maybe around a curve or a gas station entrance. But nothing. No tracks, no reflections. As if she had never been there before. The road was straight for over 3 miles, there was no way she could have left without me seeing her. I picked up the radio and tried calling someone on the default channel, but no one answered. The radio just crackled. And then a sound came on that stopped me in my tracks, a low buzzing sound, followed by a faint voice saying, "Don't look again." I turned it off immediately. I continued driving in silence, my palms sweating on the steering wheel. I knew I had seen something I wasn't supposed to see. After that night, I spent days trying to rationalize what I saw. I thought about reflexes, fatigue, a movie truck, anything. But nothing explained the lack of noise, the strange speed, the sudden disappearance. Still, I let it go. Until a month later, on a different route, this time between Amarillo and Albuquerque, it happened again. Same situation, early morning, deserted road, light rain. And then, in the rearview mirror, I saw the same yellow headlights approaching. My body froze before any thought. It was as if I knew exactly what was coming, even before I confirmed it. The stork passed quickly, just as before. Old, impeccable cars, paintwork shining in the rain. And, once again, the figures inside them. Still. Invisible to the naked eye, but noticeable if you looked in the reflection. It was as if the eyes didn't want to focus, as if the faces didn't want to be seen. The difference was that, this time, one of the passengers turned around. Not slowly. A sudden, abrupt movement. Enough to send a shiver down my spine to my scalp. He didn't look at me, but turned his face slightly, as if he knew I was looking. And the stork disappeared once more, on the same straight stretch, with no shoulder, no explanation. I arrived in Albuquerque with shaking hands. I didn't tell anyone. But I started writing everything down, time, location, road conditions. I noticed a pattern. It only appears on secondary highways, in the middle of nowhere, when the sky is overcast and there's no one else on the road. Never during the day. Never with another truck nearby. As if it chooses who it sees. I started looking for reports online, and found a few comments on obscure forums. One guy from Ohio described a stork with cars that seemed to contain memories. Another talked about passengers frozen in time. But no one could explain it. Let me just say it again, don't look twice. The third time I saw it, I wasn't surprised anymore. I was driving from Lubbock to Roswell, when, in the rearview mirror, the headlights came back on. And this time, the stork pulled up alongside me. It didn't pass by. It walked right next to me. For several seconds. My truck's engine sounded muffled, as if the sound had been sucked out. And when I looked, the cars looked older. And more damaged. Cracks in the glass. Peeling paint. But the passengers were still there. Only now, some of them were looking at me. Still. Unblinking. As if they were waiting for something. And that was when the interior light in my cabin turned on by itself. And the radio turned on again. The radio tuned itself to a dead frequency, but with background noise. A muffled sound, like a stalled engine or an old recording. And in the middle of it, a voice appeared again. Weak, drawn out, as if it were coming from far away. It only said one sentence, over and over, "There's still room." That made me speed up without thinking. The stork followed me for a few more seconds and, out of nowhere, it disappeared into the darkness, as if it had been erased from the world. When I looked in the rearview mirror, the road was empty. Absolutely empty. No lights, no headlights, no movement. And the radio turned off by itself. As if it was over. For now. I haven't seen the stork since, but I know it's still out there. Other drivers, much quieter than usual, have hinted that they've seen similar things. One of them told me, without looking me in the eye, that he once tried to pass it. He said he passed it on a highway in Nevada and, for a few seconds, saw his own face reflected in the window of one of the cars above. And the strangest part? He swears the reflection blinked, but he didn't blink at that moment. I heard that and kept quiet. Because, honestly, I don't doubt anything anymore. Today I avoid driving on very isolated roads at night. Especially on cloudy days. If I see yellow headlights in my rearview mirror, I change lanes and pretend I didn't see them. I don't look twice anymore. And I've never, ever tried to listen to the radio in the early hours of the morning again. Because there's a part of me that thinks that if I hear that phrase again, maybe I'll end up understanding what it means. Maybe it's not just about seeing. Maybe it's about being seen. And I've seen enough. If one day you are alone on the road, late at night, and an old stork approaches, with cars that no longer belong to that time, don't look. Don't stare. And above all, don't let them see you. I looked in the rearview mirror. The cars with the tow truck had people inside. But they weren't moving. I've never been superstitious, but after what I've been through, I started checking my watch every Wednesday morning. Every single one. Because there's something that happens to my truck that no mechanic can explain. It doesn't matter the route, the load, the weather, or the model of the vehicle. If I'm driving during the early hours of a Wednesday morning and the dashboard says 3:03, the brakes simply stop working. Exactly at that minute. And it's not a total failure, like the kind where the truck goes off. It's worse, they get soft. You press on them and feel no response. It's as if the pedal were made of rubber. No strength, no friction. I've already replaced the entire system. It's no use. The first time was in California, on a secondary route near Bakersfield. I was on a slight downhill slope, without much traffic, heading toward a gas station. Everything was fine until I saw that the traffic light ahead had changed. When I went to brake, I pressed the pedal down, and nothing happened. I almost threw the truck into the ditch to avoid crossing the light. I thought it was a technical failure, but the next minute, just when the dashboard turned from 3:03 to 3:04, the brakes responded normally. No squealing, no warning, as if nothing had happened. I kept thinking about it for weeks. The following week, in another state, the same thing happened. Wednesday, 3:03 a.m., brakes fail. 3:04 a.m., back. Then I started taking notes. I did 3 weeks of tests in a row, and every Wednesday I had problems at the same minute. I told a colleague, who laughed and said it was just my paranoia. But then, one day, he was in the cab with me, he was the one driving. When the clock turned 3:03 a.m., his brakes failed too. Same feeling, pedal loose, truck ignoring the command. That's when the radio turned on by itself and went silent for 5 seconds. Then it turned off. He went white. He never wanted to drive with me on a Wednesday again. But the worst part was the fourth one, when I almost didn't make it back. I was in New Mexico, on a completely straight stretch of road, with no lights. Nothing around. It was 3:03 a.m. and the truck started to accelerate on its own on a slight slope. I stepped on the brake. Nothing. I applied the engine brake. Nothing. I started to panic, the speed increased, and I was already thinking about whether to throw the truck off to the side of the road. That's when, up ahead, a hooded figure appeared, standing in the middle of the road. Motionless. 100 meters, then 80, 60. And out of nowhere, the brakes came back on. They worked perfectly. The truck stopped dead. When I looked again, the figure was still there. And what struck me most was that, before it disappeared, it smiled. I don't know how to explain it. The smile was small, almost discreet. But it was enough to completely stop me. The figure was hooded, all in black, as if it were part of the road itself. I couldn't see its face clearly, just the movement of the corner of its mouth. And then, with the flashing of the high beams, it simply disappeared. It didn't run. It didn't walk. It vanished. As if I had never been there. I stood there for a good few minutes, not knowing whether to reverse, turn off the truck or just close my eyes and pretend none of that was happening. But the clock was already showing 3:06, and everything seemed normal. As always. Except me. Since then, every Wednesday morning I've been on alert. And the pattern continues, always at 3:03 a.m., the brakes stop responding. They only come back when that figure appears. It's happened in 5 different states. And the craziest thing is that sometimes she's far away, other times closer. Once she appeared leaning against the shoulder, with her head slightly tilted, as if she were watching me pass by. Another time she was standing on top of an overpass, looking down. And always, as soon as she appears, the brakes come back. It's as if they depend on her. Or as if she decides when I can stop. I tried to tell this to a mechanic friend of mine. I showed him printouts of the truck's telemetry, the times of the failure records, and onboard logs. He just said, everything is fine, but it's as if someone had disabled and re-enabled the system from the outside. He laughed, trying to make things easier. But I could see in his eyes that he didn't understand what he saw. Neither do I. All I know is that, for some time now, the figure seems to be getting closer and closer. One morning, in Ohio, when the brakes came back on and the truck stopped, it was on the edge of my window. So close that I saw its eyes. They weren't normal. They were too dark. Too deep. And then, when I looked straight at it, I felt an instant nausea. As if my entire body had been pushed back from the inside. The figure smiled again. A bigger smile. As if it enjoyed the reaction. Then it slowly turned around and disappeared walking, without the sound of footsteps, without wind, without a trace. Since then, I stopped trying to understand what it is. Because the feeling I have is that the more I question it, the more it appears. And it gets closer and closer. As if it were testing me. And, worse, as if it were waiting for something that hasn't happened yet. This past Wednesday was different. I tried to avoid driving. I stopped at a 24-hour gas station, engine off, everything out of order. I just wanted to get past the damn 3:03 a.m. without risk. But even stopped, the light on the dashboard came on by itself. The digital display flashed the exact time, 3:03 a.m. And, for a second, the brake pedal sank by itself. As if it was being pressed by someone who wasn't there. I looked out the window and saw her again. The figure. Standing on the other side of the yard, under the yellow light of a streetlight, staring at me from under her hood. That was it. And again, as always, she smiled. At this point, I don't even wonder if it's all in my head. It can't be. It's happened to the company's backup truck before. It's happened to another colleague who used my vehicle on a Wednesday. But with him, the brakes failed for a longer period of time. They didn't come back on at 3:04. They came back on when he saw the figure in the middle of the road, just like what happened to me the first time. He only mentioned it once, and then he never wanted to talk about it again. I quit right after that. And now, no one drives that truck on Wednesdays anymore. It's parked in the company garage. But even when it's turned off, the display keeps turning on at 3:03. There are nights when I wake up for no reason, look at the clock and see 3:02. I lie there, in silence, my heart racing, waiting for it to pass. And almost always I hear a crack coming from the street. As if someone were touching the bodywork of my car. A light, rhythmic knock. Like a reminder. As if that thing still knows where I am, even though I'm not driving. As if now it's no longer about the truck, but about me. And, to be honest, I think I'm running out of time. If you're ever on the road on a Wednesday morning and the dashboard says 3:03, don't panic. Don't accelerate. And don't try to brake. Because it won't work. Just look ahead. Wait. And when it appears, don't react. Just be thankful. Because when I saw that figure standing in the middle of the road, the brakes came back on, and it smiled.